This episode of Southpaws was underwritten in part by our friend Tom from Gobles, Michigan. This special episode of Southpaws originally was recorded May 21st, 2022 in front of a live audience. Due to technical difficulties, there are intermittent sound issues in this recording. We apologize for the technical problems.
For the hardest-hitting show in talk radio, the true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to a very special edition of Southpaws. We are recording live from the Southpaws 10th Anniversary Listener Appreciation Party on May 21st, 2022. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your co-host.
And I'm Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
I'm Katy J, fellow co-host.
And for the first time ever, we are recording in front of a live audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. We have a lot of people we need to thank for this party today. We want to thank the Grand Rapids Employees Independent Union for allowing us the use of the hall. We also want to thank our longtime supporters and listeners of the show, Pat and Missy, for hosting us today.
Yes.
We want to give special thanks to recording artist Rissa Jade for performing songs from her new album, Jesus Issues, which you can find streaming everywhere. And a very special thank you to everyone who came out today. For those of you that are new-time listeners or this is your first time hearing the show, let me just give you a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, or Reason.fm by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on those stations as well. And I got to tell you, folks, the very first episode of this show aired on May 16th, 2012. And although there have been personnel changes over the years, we have continued to spread the word about progressive causes. The first week we were on the show was also the week the former state representative Roy Schmidt switched parties and tried to get his nephew's best friend to run against him as a fake Democrat. We called him out on it. We had the chair of the Democratic Party on the show as well. We have had guests from all spectrums. We've had book authors such as our friend Bob Tart, who unfortunately could not make it to the party today. We've had a multitude of candidates and lawmakers on the show, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Attorney General Dana Nessel, and Senator Gary Peters. We've had comics, including Brian B. from Sunday Night Funnies, the most famous person from my hometown, John Bowman, and his former boss, comic legend Louis Black. We have also made predictions on Southpaws that have come true. I'm very proud to say that I was the only political pundit nationally to predict Bernie Sanders would win the Michigan primary in 2016. And former co-host Joe Elder correctly predicted on July 22nd, 2015, that the Democratic Party would screw Bernie Sanders out of the presidential nomination. So I tell you what, let's go back in time and let's play that clip where he gets into it with Nate Kettle from the Boiling Kettles.
Second response.
Go for
Number
it.
one, haven't voted for, only have voted for one libertarian in my life. Number two, been extendedly disenfranchised by the Democratic Party, having grown up in a Democratic household and being consistently disappointed in their effort and consistently disappointed in the fact that they do not go after. Number one,
because they
don't represent
act like Republicans.
No.
Up at the highest levels of the Democratic Party and the federal government.
Yes.
Some of them act like Republicans.
No,
that is your only
system.
argument against the Democrats, is that they occasionally act like Republicans.
We will see. We will see. Last thing I'll say here, we'll see how good the Democratic Party is and how faithful and how fair they are and how illustriously better they are than all other parties when they screw Bernie Sanders over in his own Democratic caucus. You will see. We'll see. You guys will say that they won't, but you have a little pitter-patter in your heart knowing that will flip and happen, my friends, because it's a fixed game, and they both suck.
And if
both parties
and if they do
suck.
it at the highest levels of the federal government, yes, the Democrats do. Some of the Democrats do act like Republicans.
And if they do that to Bernie Sanders, you can guarantee I will be the first one to call them out by name and tell them what I think about them.
Yeah, well, get ready, because it'll happen.
And when I did that, WPRR fired my ass. Plain and simple. And this is the first time I'm publicly talking about it, and I don't care. Jack, do you have any thoughts about the history of the show? You've been around since September of 2016.
Yeah, Darren, the big picture that you're identifying there, the similarities in the corporate parties, the limousine liberals, as we call them, in the Democratic Party. But the phenomena of seeing Trump elected has been a dark day, the darkest day, and it turned over a new threat, a threat that has me sitting here with a foreboding feeling in the future of, to put it in a picture, a democracy with a noose around its neck. We have two elections coming in a matter of years that could really represent the end of any shred of democracy in this country. We can buy machine guns. We can't buy baby formula. We have violence erupting around us. We have literally in our hometown this weekend, if you listen to the news, we had a shooting right here at Kentwood. There's no safe place. The shootings took place at 3 o'clock in the morning outside of Division Avenue and are taking place at high school graduations. Whether it's a grocery store, a family outing, and we have a previous president, who said that if anybody were to rough up a liberal at his outings, his campaign speeches, he would pay for their legal fees. We have threats against gay people, liberals, minorities. Look at the amount of violence perpetrated against the Hispanic community. And there's political reasons for this. And that's why I'm sitting at this table. The only antidote I know is truth. This very dark day. I am sympathetic towards Native Americans. I had a sister who was a lawyer for Native Americans for years in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And so around the family table, I would listen when I was young to her helping them. And then have studied them. I taught the book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, in a journalism class. And I remember repeatedly they would say in the accounts of the Native American objectives that all they wanted was some fresh water, fresh air, some security, and peace. They didn't go to Columbia Law School. They didn't go to journalism school. They weren't Rhodes Scholars, but they knew greed when they saw it, didn't they? It's not complicated. They knew the lust for power when they saw it. Those simple things now are being threatened. That list of very foundational, fundamental things are on the chopping block. Peace, security, safe water, the environment, all of those things are on the table. And this is not a night of entertainment. We're not here as entertainers, far from it. I'm an old football coach. These are people, and this is a man who has felt the burden of trying to save this sinking ship. So please be here realizing, if anything else, we truly believe what we're doing. We believe in it. We're not doing this for stardom. And so we're glad you can be here and share our passion. But to answer your question, Darren, I do have one thing I remember. There's been a number of coined phrases that have come out of the show. One of them that I think is maybe the most contagious was that we started years ago calling the conservative code for the word freedom, we said was freedom. They really were calling for the chance to be freely stupid. Forget facts, forget precedents, forget the history books, forget the science books. They can be dumb. They're free to be dumb. So when they say they stand for freedom, in my mind, that's what they're talking about.
And here's the other thing, too. When they're talking about education, they're not talking about what we would consider education. They don't want critical race theory taught. They don't want anything in the schools about transgendered people, about gay people. They want their straight, white, Christian, conservative history taught. That's pretty much what they want.
If it doesn't glorify America, don't put it in the book. Don't espouse it, don't promulgate it.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned a little bit about the violence here. We might as well just get right into our typical segment, so let's play the music.
Stop! Hammer time!
Oh yeah, it's hammer time. It is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. And it's somebody we haven't dropped the hammer on in a long time. Former has-been rock star Ted Nugent is back in the headlines again for being a complete jerk. Last Saturday, on May 14th, Ted was down in Austin, Texas at a Trump rally, and he had some comments about conservatives and what conservatives need to do. So here's the first cut.
This horrible freak infesting the White House right now is a direct result of good Americans bending over and not participating.
The freak infesting the White House. Of course, he's talking about President Joe Biden, which I don't even know what to say about that, really.
I do. The language that uses the word infestation is classic, nationalist propaganda?
Oh, yeah.
It harkens back to when the Nazis were rising. They used infestation as a racially motivated term.
Yes, they did.
That's right.
Yeah. But... go ahead.
I was just going to talk more about how it others people. In this context, Joe Biden is white. It's not racially motivated. It's just othering, belittling, putting people beneath themselves.
And Ted wasn't done. So here's cut 2 of what he said in Austin, Texas.
And now, my beloved Detroit, my beloved birth state of Michigan politically is a suburb of San Francisco. Because the conservatives bent over and gave it away. The enemy didn't win. We lost because we cultivated Mitt Romneys to represent the Republican Party. And that's suicide.
Wow. What was it Reagan used to say? The 11th commandment, thou shalt never speak ill of another Republican. I think Ted forgot that. I don't know. Let's go to cut 3 because there's a little bit more here.
So thank you for being here, but remember, you being here won't matter unless each and every one of you go forth and motivate, inspire, force, if I do say so myself, everybody in your life to think of what the enemies of America have done in the last 14 months. And that they didn't sneak into the White House. They lied, they cheated, they scammed, and every day the Democrats violate their sacred oath to the Constitution. And if you can't impress your friends on that, they shouldn't be your friends.
Wow. So Ted's just going right after the last 14 months.
Yeah. So we call that projection.
Yeah.
When you are accusing others of doing something that you yourself are guilty of. So lying, cheating, stoking violence, all things that Ted is directly speaking to or alluding to that the left is doing, Ted is projecting.
That's right.
Yes, he is. And here's the real egregious part. Here's the final cut, thankfully. Ted Nugent calling for violence against Democrats. Take a good listen to this.
So I love you people madly, but I'd love you more if you went forward and just went berserk on the skulls of the Democrats and the Marxists and the communists.
Wow. The Democrats, Marxists, and communists.
Well, that's not unusual. Trump said not too long ago that the election officials in Michigan should be assassinated. They should be killed.
Yes, that was just in the news recently. Jocelyn Benson was interviewed, our Secretary of State, and she had heard that story. Of course, Trump is denying that ever happened, but when doesn't he lie? As I've said on this show multiple times, I wouldn't trust anything coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, even if his tongue was notarized. So, but we're not the only ones that have had negative things to say about Ted Nugent in the past. So let's play this classic clip of Keith Olbermann.
But our winner has been rocker Ted Nugent. In his Washington Times column, seriously, Ted Nugent's political column, he writes of the Occupy movement, while I don't condone violence, watching the cops pounce on and pepper spray a few Occupy stooges and then drag the dirt balls off to jail in shackles is good for my conservative soul and gold for my sense of humor. Everyone needs at least one hearty laugh every day. You have to admit that watching a stinky, dirty hippie being dragged off to jail is as funny as watching Mo hit Larry and Curly with a pipe wrench. This is funny stuff, lighten up. One visual reminder here is necessary. This is Nugent on the cover of Cat Scratch Fever, his last mediocre record from 1977. He really wrote stinking, dirty hippie about somebody else after making a reputation as one? All.
That clip always cracks me up, and how Olbermann got away with calling Ted Nugent an asshole on cable television is beyond me. Well, I don't know. By the way, I should mention, we will have the mic here. If anybody wants to come up and kind of chime in, we will have the mic here. So
yes, anybody,
just come
please.
on
That's the difference between any one of our shows in the last few years, is that we've never had a direct feedback, people in an audience. So we'd really like to avail that. If you feel free to come on up right here.
And it has been a very long time since we've had callers, so we just don't have the technology to do it. So, yep, so congratulations to Ted Nugent, winner of Hammer Time. Ted, we got this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag!
Yeah, that's right. Old Deadly Tedley, he needs to stop being a douchebag. And I might as well answer a question that listeners have come up to me and asked all the years. They said, Darren, how can you get away with using douchebag on the air? Well, it's really easy. Douchebag is FCC compliant. And words like asshole, prick, and dickhead aren't. So, hey, got to follow the rules sometimes, right? Oh, man.
And it's actually the perfect word. A douchebag is literally a sexist tool that is unnecessary and
Absolutely.
bad for everyone's health.
And that is another reason why I've used that word over the years.
George Carlin is a patron saint to us. He's a foundation of truth. And you know what I think it's his 5 words that can't be said.
The 7 dirty words.
7 dirty words.
Yep.
So we're careful, thanks to George.
Yeah, and WBAI, the flagship of Pacifica Radio, because they were the ones that aired his 7 dirty words routine back in the early 70s and got in trouble for it. So they went to court and said, oh, no, we have freedom of speech. You're violating the First Amendment. And they said, no, we can put limits on speech. We've talked about that on our First Amendment show that we did a couple months ago, Jack. So.
And wouldn't we just all be so happy if Carlin was in this atmosphere with the conservative clowns? It'd be a breath of fresh air.
Oh, yes, it would.
Not to mention the fact that the Supreme
Court... Oh, hey, come on up here, Chuck. Our good friend King Chuck Cook.
You have to realize that the Supreme Court back in 1978 was majority Republican too.
That's very true.
Yep. So that's probably the reason why we have the 7 dirty words thing. And and I talk about all the time that over the years the FCC has gotten worse, and it's so funny that the FCC used to protect us all, because back in the olden days, if you're an old timer, TV sets only went to 2 through 13. There were some towns that only could have 2 TV stations, and the big cities got like 5. But then they said in the 60s, you got to have VHF on all TV sets so you could have more choices for channels.
Right.
And then, in the 70s, they took away a TV station's license down in Jackson, Mississippi, because they were very racist towards African Americans. Channel 3 LBT down in Jackson.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's true. They were owned by an insurance company that had ties with the Ku Klux Klan. And they actually blacked out certain TV shows from NBC. Like the Today Show, they had an episode in which Third Road Marshall was a guest. And they actually cut to black and said that they were having problems with the cable. But it turned out they censored the whole thing because they didn't want a black guy having an opinion on their station.
Which is horrible.
Well, in 1971, the FCC said, "We're taking away your license, sorry." They gave it to a group of minority investors. But then, then the situation with Carlin happened, and you had the 7 dirty, indecency rules. You had fairness doctrine taken away, Telecom 96, Janet Jackson incident, and, it just gets worse and worse from there. Mm-hmm. And now with another Supreme Court that is now going to try to take away abortion rights, this is what we get for electing leaders who don't care about freedom.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say about that.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about abortion while we're discussing it here. Recently, a Michigan Court of Claims judge issued a ruling in favor of Planned Parenthood of Michigan. It's an injunction that keeps the Attorney General's office from enforcing the 1931 ban on abortions in Michigan in the event Roe versus Wade is overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, again, Attorney General Dana Nessel, who has been a guest on this show, is very pro-choice, and she has said that she will not defend the 1931 law. The problem is that county prosecutors can do what they want, one of them being Chris Becker right here in Grand Rapids. So the one thing that Dana Nessel is really worried about is that there's a 6-year statute of limitations on the 1931 law, meaning that if a woman got an abortion, they could go back 6 years later and prosecute her for having that abortion done, which is scary as hell. Katie, I know you've wanted to talk at great length about this.
Where do I start?
At the beginning.
Well, when I first learned about the leak from the Supreme Court, I wish I could say I was surprised. I think one of the first things I did was started looking at websites. I am open to saying I went on Amazon and ordered multiple packages of Plan B for myself and my friends, should we ever need them, because we don't know how long access to that type of healthcare is going to be allowable. But I find myself in the weeks following this announcement of the possible overturning, going down all of these paths and branches of like, what if in this situation? What about this? And what about ectopic pregnancy? What about like sepsis? What about if the fetus isn't viable? What about in the case of rape or incest, which are really classic talking points in politics? So I essentially followed multiple rabbit holes and really enjoyed my time on social media, just feeling angry. And then shopping for contraception helped me feel like I was be able to do something about it, as does talking today. So the biggest thing that I come back to is that to be an organ donor, you have to fill out paperwork. And being an organ donor is not something that you can be compelled to do, because when you pass away, your corpse has bodily autonomy. They cannot harvest your liver, your kidneys, your spleen, even to save the life of somebody else whose life could be saved by using it. So what we are saying, if we overturn Roe v. Wade, is that young women or people with female reproductive organs that these people, I'm going to use the term women for shorthand here, that young women of childbearing age have less bodily autonomy than a corpse. And if you remember a few years back, Texas was considering a law that essentially established women of childbearing age as pregnant. Biologically speaking, it was something to do with the point in a woman's menstrual cycle, saying that if she was not currently menstruating, she was within a certain number of weeks and she could be pregnant, because how could she know? And so I don't remember the outcome of that law, but it was a really scary time. I remember having similar emotions in response to that law's potential passing, thinking that if we establish all women of all people with female reproductive organs of childbearing age as automatically pregnant, that is one of the most repressed groups of people in the country. Pregnant people already don't have bodily autonomy. And so what this ruling being overturned means is that we are finding another way to take rights away from women for the so-called argument about protecting the fetus.
Yes. Like I said, this is scary as hell, what the Supreme Court's doing, because when this first came out, one of the things that we talked about, Jack and I did, what's next? Are they going to go back to black people being 3/5 of a vote or 3/5 of a person for voting?
Same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriage.
Can we take it in the other direction? Could I be considered to be two people right now? I'm a female of childbearing age.
Interesting.
If I have certain cells in my body, I could be pregnant. Nobody here can tell by looking at me. So possibly I am two people. Can I collect child support? Can I have two votes?
There you go.
Can I claim tax exemption for having a child?
We all know the answer to the question.
If somebody attacks me, can I claim a hate crime as a potentially pregnant person? It needs to go both ways.
And can there be two charges? Because you are two people.
If someone were to take my life, or if I were to lose my life to medical negligence, is this a double homicide?
These are all questions that we don't know the answers to.
No.
And nobody on
tell.
the right has thought about this. They just, we're going to stop abortion.
I may need to say that the views I'm expressing today are solely my own and not the views of my potential child, who is a solely independent person.
That is true.
I am not pregnant, by the way. And if anyone listening to this show finds themselves in that situation and they are struggling and they are in a red state and they are scared, you can go to ineedana.com, ineedana.com, and they will help you find information on how to secure an abortion.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for finding that site.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. George, again, I don't want to quote the wise man too many times here tonight. He had it pretty well figured out when he said the conservatives really care about that fetus. But once that fetus is born, watch the hell out. There's no more need for Head Start. There's no meals that need to be fed to those children in the elementary schools. Just get them physically capable of feeding the military system, and that's what we really consider for their value. I'm going to take it a step farther, or maybe more at the headwaters. I'm going to go to the biblical Western influence in our culture. The Bible talks about the woman being the servant of a man. The Bible has an account of one of the chosen men of God in the line of Jesus who lusted after a woman. Unfortunately, she was married. And he took it upon himself to lure him into a battle where he would be killed. Then went and took her into his palace. I never have heard that preached in a pulpit church somewhere that is completely discriminatory towards a female. That she really was just an object of power for the king. We live in a culture where a man of God, and Samuel, I believe it is, takes two of his daughters and submits them to be raped out in front of his house. I'm not going to embellish. We have a split decision in this country. One where the woman knows her place, is not allowed to speak in front of men, and where her body is not really hers. It's not her under her control, it's the male's. And that's a biblical injunction. I'm not here to pick on Christianity, but I can tell you those things are in the Bible. And so now we sit in 2020 after layers and layers of that cultural impact on us. It's being resurrected. It's coming back. And the scary thing is, I don't see a way out right now. I have to tell you, I'm that pessimistic. I have granddaughters, they were here. I have a daughter. And I fear for their freedoms. I fear for their health.
As all women should be fearful, whether they were born women or not. They should all be scared. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting what's going on right now.
And I think we also have to talk about the way that this intersects with race. And something that fascinates me is that Reagan, the patron saint of Republicans, was pro-abortion. And do you know why? It's because abortion was mostly used by people of lesser economic means. And now we're talking black and brown people. And so the conservatives back in that era saw abortion as a means of population control for minorities and used its access and availability as a tool of white supremacy. And what's fascinating to me is that now the conservatives are anti-abortion, but they're still managing to be racist about it because their anti-abortion views are going to disproportionately affect women and people who can bear children who are black and brown and are continually economically disadvantaged. And of course, having a child against your will not only is traumatic, but it is life-changing for your body, for your economic stability, for your political ability to participate. And so it doubles down on the racial and sociological inequities that we see. And so, of course, there is no humor to be found in this, but the only thing that sort of puts a half smile on my face in the grimmest of ways is that the Republicans have managed to take two sides to the exact same issue and be racist both times.
Wow.
You're good at it.
Yes. Very. Yeah, what is your name?
My name is Vince Catalanati. I'm from the west side, the best side.
Yes.
All right. So I wanted to address the issue of abortions for the underprivileged in the Reagan era. I was starting my career in medicine over 40 years ago, and I worked for a Catholic hospital. In fact, I worked for a couple of them. And you're right, the minorities might have had abortions in clinics, but there was a real run on D&Cs on Thursday and Friday afternoons for the wealthy white. And it got to be in the early 80s when we were going to DRGs that there was an actual uprising in the insurance companies over the number of hysterectomies that were being done on white women. And so many of them not clinically necessary, but convenient. And the convenience was they weren't getting pregnant that way. Okay, they had a good insurance, so they had Blue Cross in Detroit. The other thing is that I worked for a hospital that went through a major merger with a secular hospital in Battle Creek. And Lila Post, a Catholic hospital, merged with Community, the secular hospital, the community hospital. And obviously Catholic hospitals didn't do abortions. They did do D&Cs, but they didn't do abortions per se. Community, on the other hand, did. So what do you do when you merge these two entities and the people that are doing most of your baby deliveries are also doing most of your abortions, and you need to have a clinic? You need to have a space. So what they did was they sold the 9th floor of the community hospital to the OB-GYN group. They actually spent the money to put in a separate entrance and a separate elevator. So that became a separate hospital, not at all related to now Battle Creek Health Systems, which was really Lila Post and Community merged. So what happened was, after about a year of architectural stuff, while people debated whether they could do it, and until the merger was finalized, they continued to be done at Community, although the sisters didn't like it. And eventually, though, the sisters sold the 9th floor. And then they had to pay for architects to come in and put in their own elevator, which really wasn't necessary because there were elevators to the 9th floor, but they weren't going to work anymore. And there was a common entrance to the hospital, but they needed a separate one for the women's clinic. And so if you go to Battle Creek today and you need an abortion, go over to the largely Catholic-owned through Trinity Health, Battle Creek Health Systems, And don't forget to visit the 9th floor of what used to be Community Hospital, because you can get your abortions there, and it really doesn't matter what color you are. They build them up there. So much for abortions. There's a lot of Janus kind of look at it, the two faces, one looking toward and one looking away. And the difference is that people with money, regardless of their color, can look away from it and call it something that it isn't and justify it. If you want to read a good book about this, try and find a copy of a book called The Fourth Procedure. The Fourth Procedure addresses the abortion issue because it's a story of a woman and a man who find themselves pregnant, married, and unfortunate Southern senator who's all against abortion. And there's a bombing at the abortion clinic where this woman goes to have child care services, ostensibly. And she's killed in this blast. That leaves her husband grieving. And the senator, in the meantime, is kidnapped. I'll give you a hint on the story. There's a doctor over there who has figured out a way to transplant pregnant uteruses into men. Mm-hmm. And the position changes that both of them take. The husband who said we can't afford the baby suddenly wants the baby to live because that's all he has left of his wife. And the senator wants this damn thing out of him, okay? So you should read it because it's really revealing in a poetic way about the difficulty of the abortion issue. One last thing I'd like to add is that I went to high school with this idiot named Ted Nugent.
Oh, Mr. Nugent.
I was a senior in the band when he came in the 10th grade, and I just want you to know that whether it's appropriate or not, he was an asshole since the 10th grade. He came by it easily. I'm beginning to think it might be genetic. And he underwent a change when he was a hippie. I don't know if it was the drugs or the loud guitar music, but douchebag of the week, he was being called that in 1965. So I congratulate you, even if it is late, at getting to him. 57 years later, he's been living the life, and the title officially is long overdue.
Consistent.
Yes. And by the way, one thing that I really am not a big fan of Mr. Nugent about is the hunting trips that he takes, because
hunting trips?
Yeah, those are farms that he
there's fences around the game.
Yeah, he's not a real hunter. Not that I haven't hunted in years, so I don't even advocate hunting myself. But yeah, I wonder how Mr. Nugent would feel if the deer actually had guns.
Well, then it would be a sport.
Oh.
Because there would be competition.
But he wouldn't like that because, this is the same Ted Nugent that literally shit his pants to avoid going to Vietnam and, didn't bathe for a week and acted like he was nuts.
And nobody noticed the difference, did they?
Yeah. One thing you can say about Ted Nugent is that he's consistent.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's
and I learned today how little he's changed since 1965, whereas Donald Trump changes what he says between breaths.
Right.
Yeah, essentially. Stand right over here, Terry, away from the speakers.
Better now?
Yeah, much better.
Can everybody hear me? I'm not good at impromptu speaking, but I had just a couple comments from what I heard up here. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she said it's not about abortion. That's only a part of it.
Yeah.
It's about women's rights.
Hey, Terry, you got to get that mic a lot closer to your mouth so we can hear you. There we go.
Okay, yeah. So, it's about women's rights. Women's rights to keep private and keep the government from making those decisions for you. That's what it is. And it should be addressed that way to me because, nobody likes abortion. And probably especially the woman having it, right? I mean, I'm sure it's the last, choice, that she has. So, just kind of keep that conscious that the word abortion is that's what the Republicans want you to think it's all about. But in fact, it's more about a woman's right to her own body and her own keeping it private and making those decisions within herself, family, or whatever, right?
That's right.
And I saw a meme, a pretty funny meme actually, and this is going to address something that Jack said. Jack, you said that you don't see any way out of this situation. everything that's going on with the, slipping away from democracy and more into autocracy and fascism, which is no doubt been going on since Reagan put it into. I mean, it's been going on before Reagan. He just happened to be the guy to usher it in.
Yep.
With killing the unions, right? Isn't that the first thing that Hitler did? He went after the union leaders. That's what Hitler did first thing. That's what Reagan did, right?
Yep.
Anyway, on and on with it. I'm not a historian, but Meme had this lady going into the pharmacy. She was going to see her pharmacist, and she says, "Hey, have you got anything that can keep the Republicans out of my uterus?" Yeah, and then the pharmacist says, "Oh yes, voting. Go vote and do it liberally." So yeah, that's our power. Our power is in numbers, and we need to all go vote. That's our way out. That's the only way out we have. We don't have the money, right? We obviously certainly don't have the broadcast. Although Southpaws, you guys are doing a great. We need millions of you, really to match what the broadcast power that they have.
And that's really the problem, is that there's really nobody else talking about this,
right?
Other than Pacifica.
And Terry, you know who knows that better than anybody else? Are the Republicans. The Republicans know that's the way out. Why do you think they have a barrage of restrictions as minute as not supplying water while you're waiting, taking away Sunday voting, which is traditionally a black day of voting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because they know they can't win any other way. That's part of my fear, is that in that noose around our neck, there is this legislation now to really F up our voting, freedom of our voting.
Yeah. We're definitely having issues with our wireless, so we're probably gonna have to skip that.
In answer to your question about how Trump could do that, the answer is magic. Any good magic trick requires diversion. And he was never put there to lead. He was put there to divert our attention. And he did that every day. I used to wake up and say, do I have to change the blades on the fan again because it's coming? I would just wait for the, excuse the expression, storm to hit every day, because he would always come up with something. But you know what? They did get 3 Supreme Court justices, and they did pass a lot of stuff, and they were able to obfuscate for a long time. And I think the real power belonged to McConnell, not Trump. But McConnell wouldn't have been so successful if he didn't have somebody in office diverting the audience's attention and going, "God, what a jackass, I can't believe he did that, and how he humiliated our country." Do you know that even Putin was tired of explaining stuff to him? I saw that today on Axios, and they were talking about it, and they've got a picture of Trump talking with his little hands in the air, and Putin is sitting in the other chair with his head down and his hands in his lap, and the caption is, Putin, it's known now that Putin grew wary of having to explain stuff to Trump all the time, because he was a kiss-ass.
Well, Putin knows that he's a genius. Trump knows that Putin is a genius. So.
Oh, yeah, he said that repeatedly.
Well, Trump is literally a tool. He's a blunt instrument the Republican Party can wield, either as a distraction or to pummel the progressive interests of the left or the corporate Democrats, wherever they're aiming their vitriol that week.
Yeah.
Yes, and he is literally a tool.
Speaker, young man here.
Like I said, we're kind of having some mic issues.
My nephew from Albion College, he just graduated, and he has his first job teaching in Jackson.
Oh, nice. Yep. Nice. Thank you.
I was going to switch topics over to the Supreme Court, because I'm a student of political science, so that's where most of my expertise is, with history and political science. So one of the big things that I've learned going through college is that with the Supreme Court, famously in Federalist Number 78, the Supreme Court is noted as being the least powerful branch, or the weakest branch of the government. Where personally, I think that if it comes to the point where we are able to completely excuse precedent, like this would be doing with overturning Roe v. Wade, then it would probably be the most dangerous form of government at that point. Because like you were saying about what else can they do about taking away rights of people and et cetera, et cetera. Well, we do have some safeguards in that it's all repealable. It's all additions to the Constitution, or I can't remember the word right now, I'm blanking on it. Everything that's going through the Supreme Court right now, and how we see that they might overturn Roe v. Wade, I guess they could look back on to when we had the fireside chat from FDR in 1937, I think it was, where he gets kind of on the butt of the Supreme Court for overturning all the economic decisions that he was trying to make to get us out of the Great Depression, and turns it and essentially says that the people want change in the United States, where it seems like a lot of time the politicians nowadays are trying to say that's what's happening, but it's not really the case, because if you look at most polls that are done, no matter what news source it comes from, it's between 60 to 80% of American people, no matter what political affiliation, are against overturning Roe v. Wade. So it's completely in the power of the political spectrum inside of people who hold control right now, of who are trying to make that decision for everybody else, trying to use representative democracy to try to push their own political ideologies into our system, where by doing so, and by putting what they think is right instead of what the American people think is right, they'll damage the whole system of our government by making the Supreme Court a political entity rather than keeping it a separate identity that's supposed to protect the American people from majoritarian decisions.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Terry, you got something else?
It's going to be the first time that the Supreme Court is going to take away rights. They've added rights before, like, Dred Scott and thing. They made, gave Americans more rights, but it's the first time that they're going to take away a right, or rights.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And that's not right.
No.
Jackson High School's lucky to have you, buddy.
I find myself questioning, what is the greater motivator here? Is it like evil in overturning Roe, or is this a power play for fundraising? Is it greed? And I think I know in my core that this is really under threat, but I fall victim to denial. I sit here and I think about how this can affect me and so many women that I care about. And then I think, maybe this is just a power play. Maybe they're just being greedy, because leaking that Roe could be overturned, first of all, it makes sense in the grand scheme of how they have been stacking the court. Clearly, we have multiple justices who have lied in their hearings before being put on the court. But there's also a part of me that's like, this is a great fundraising opportunity for both sides. One side is motivated by their so-called ideology of protecting, quote, life, meaning a clump of cells that have the life potential, but only when they're carried by a host. And the other side is motivated by protecting life, meaning the real actual lives of women or people with female reproductive organs. And what does it mean for their lives, and what does it mean for the future of our country?
Yeah, definitely. History is at stake here. I mean, it is. And even though, let's say the Supreme Court does indeed overturn Roe v. Wade, how long is it going to take for another court to gel together and say the decision to overturn was wrong? Is it going to take 10 years, 20, 30? What are women going to do in that time? That's what's scary as hell to me. Because it could take forever. Because we're seeing with the Democrats, they don't have the stones. Sorry, I'll say it. They don't have the stones like FDR did. FDR, when the Supreme Court was overturning all of his plans to get out of the Depression, FDR said, okay, I'll stack the court then. And then everybody is like, whoa, wait a minute. Then the Supreme Court fell right back in line and started acting pretty decently. But I'm sure, Jack, your nephew, could probably tell us a little more about that, since you have studied that topic.
Yeah, so one thing this is very similar to when we talk about history repeating itself, and we have to learn from history so we don't repeat it, is if you look back, a completely different topic, back to post-slavery in the 1860s in the Deep South. We see just after slavery is over, Black Americans are being elected into political offices, and they are able to take control and implement systems that benefit African Americans into implementing life. to themselves and to their future generations, and getting rid of a lot of racist laws down in the southern United States. Where then come the 1880s into the 1890s, we have the end of the Reformation period and the beginning of the Jim Crow America, when we have rights being started to be taken away, which is what we can kind of see now with abortion. We see that we went through a period after Roe v. Wade where we have a lot of progressiveness and a lot of freedom of choice and stuff, and it's slowly being dismantled over the past 20 years to the point where we have a Supreme Court decision, which may or may not happen in the future, but like what happened with, why am I blanking on the name right now? I have Plessy v. Ferguson stuck in my head and no, that's not the name of it, but it's the segregation, separation of Brown versus Board of Education. The Brown versus Board of Education overturned the Supreme Court case that I'm thinking of at the moment. In the 1899, I know the year.
Yeah.
The segregation is lawful as long as it is equal. Is that Plessy versus Ferguson? Okay, cool. Yeah. Plessy versus Ferguson. So, sorry about that. I'm tripping over my own words right now. I think I need to go take a little nap. So we have Plessy versus Ferguson that comes up. I think I said that earlier as well. Where we have Plessy versus Ferguson that happens in the 1890s that completely overturns everything, overturns all precedent that has been set by the Supreme Court that could be similar to what would be happening in the future here. So if you follow through the patterns in history with Roe v. Wade and Plessy versus Ferguson, it's very similar to what's happening to Roe v. Wade right now. That's what happened to the implementation of Plessy versus Ferguson when it came to enacting Jim Crow laws in the United States and allowing segregation. And as we see, that stayed for 100 years until there was a violent and bloody civil rights movement. And that's kind of redundant, civil rights movement is peaceful and all that kind of stuff by the people who were doing it, but not quite by the system of government that we had here in the United States.
That's right.
So that if you don't have, I don't want to say a radical revolution, because that's kind of, counterproductive. But if people don't get out and vote and show that they are not in support of overturning it, then it could be the case that we have something like Plessy versus Ferguson where Roe v. Wade is overturned for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
And we'd never see it again.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, the summer's here. I guess you call it summer. It's been weird, darkest April in history. The season is ripe for protest. Darren and I have gone to a couple of protests right downtown. The leak gives us a little opportunity. It's like a game plan revealed early. And I just am so confident when women do something. And I had a mother who was a freedom writer, wrote down to list people in the voting back in Mississippi in those days. And they get things done. And I have real confidence that they're going to be in the streets protesting, and we should support that.
Yes, we should. As I mentioned on the show, when Poland tried to ban abortion just a few months ago, millions of women started marching in the streets and said, absolutely not. And the government backtracked immediately. And I think that's what needs to happen, is tens of millions of women just saying, we're done, and march and show not just the Supreme Court, not just the Congress, not just the president, but to show this country that they're damn serious about keeping abortion legal and safe.
I agree. At the same time, unfortunately, we are not Poland. It's a privilege to be able to protest. It's a privilege of people who are able-bodied. It's a privilege of people who can make time out of their schedule. So usually people who are more economically advantaged, who can transport themselves to that protest, who are healthy enough to be in a crowd of people, especially with the COVID pandemic. We actively, we say that we support the right to protest, but everything about our economic and political system actively suppresses the ability of people to protest.
Very true. If I can interject there, since this is a form of media, when they had the protests all over the United States, remember here a week ago, dozens of cities, Channel 8 had the outrage to say that there was an opposing view down at Calder Square. I call it Calder Square, where there was a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5 people, fundamentalists on the north side of the, facing off hundreds of females protesting And they gave that equal balance. They said that was there's two sides of that issue.
And they call that neutrality.
And yeah, right. It's a false equivalency, a dangerous false equivalency. The media is apt at it, very apt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Channel 8 does it. I'll just say it. I used to work for them. They do it at the whim of the DeVos family. So does 13, so does 17, so does 3, so does the Grand Rapids Press. I'll say it. I don't care. If I end up dead in the next week, you better go to Bessie DeVos's house in Ada, because it's probably her that did it. Yeah, that's exactly it, Terry. She won't do it herself because she's too busy drinking on her super yacht or
Wouldn't
whatever.
that be considered a post-term abortion? How many months old are you?
Yeah, let's see. I don't want to reveal my age in front of everybody.
Months. We're not going to do the math.
Okay. Oh, my gosh. We're way over time. Any final thoughts, Jack?
No, I enjoyed that immensely. Like a live crowd. I've never seen it. It feels terrific. Really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Katie?
I would add that privilege accelerates privilege. People in power have a vested interest in keeping themselves and people like themselves in power because they serve their own interests.
And one thing you had mentioned earlier about being able to protest is privilege.
It is.
And that's something...
And it should be a right.
We need to take that to heart because we need to start thinking about others, folks. We really do. This country has been selfish for far too long, and I have said since day one of the show, selfishness is going to destroy this country.
When you consider what the minimum wage should be in the light of inflation, I think the latest figure I saw was that we should stop fighting for $15 minimum wage because that's outdated.
Not enough.
It should be $24. Is that about what you've read recently?
That's
$24
what I've read.
minimum wage. I didn't make that when I started my job with a master's degree. So when you take an hourly worker who is making, what, $7 something?
$7.50.
It's a gallon and a portion of gas for an hour of wages.
Yeah.
And then with skyrocketing rent, we can't be asking people who work hourly at minimum wage to be protesting when these laws that are being passed are going to disenfranchise them the most. And something I spoke to earlier was about how Roe v. Wade is essentially, it's completely enmeshed with racism. It is a policy that people have racist desires when they want to overturn it, and in the past when they wanted to support it. But I also do want to note that this is economic. This is not just about women of color. This is about white women too. White women have abortions at a greater rate because there are more white women in the country. And so I don't want to misconstrue my point that this is only a racial issue, that this is a women's issue and an issue for everybody. For the men that care about, I'm about to say the men that care about their mothers, sisters, wives, partners, girlfriends, daughters, nieces, aunts, etc. But you shouldn't have to know and love a woman to care about bodily autonomy.
That's a very good point, Katie. Yeah. Well, folks, I tell you what, we definitely have run out of time for this episode. We thank you very much for coming down and spending your afternoon with us and helping us celebrate our 10th anniversary. I'm hoping for at least 10 more, God willing, or pasta far willing. I don't know. Folks, we will be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
And I'm Katy J.
For our announcer, please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.